This option is the ultimate nightmare of astrobiologists. That there is a fascinating history of life to be discovered on another world, but we contaminate it with our own organisms before we learn the true history. The worst-case scenario might have been that simple life of Martian origin survived on Mars, but that terrestrial life displaced it so that it quickly died out. This very real fear is why we are often so reluctant to explore other planets and alien worlds from a biological perspective. The Mars rover Curiosity. Nevertheless, the Mars rovers, most notably the Curiosity model, remain key allies in the exploration of Mars. In 2013, the robot took a rock sample by drilling a hole about a half-inch wide and 3 inches deep. The U.S. Space Agency NASA announced the rock samples would be evaluated the coming day. The sample revealed that there was water with a relatively neutral pH. Ever since the first probes flew by to Mars, images have fired the human imagination. In the 1970s, photographs like the Mars face caused a sensation. Later, it turned out that all the shapes reminiscent of faces, buildings, or traces of living creatures are nothing more than an optical illusion. Mars research is now much more advanced. We humans have already placed research robots on Mars, and in the next 15 years, rock samples taken on Mars will return to Earth. Meanwhile, the news about strange discoveries on Mars and exciting photographs never stop. Today, we present to you 5 puzzling pictures that were really taken on Mars, as well as their true backgrounds. But before we get started, we'd like to ask you to make a small contribution to our work. First, Mars coral. This image, much more reminiscent of a terrestrial beach, was actually taken on Mars. It is hard to believe that these delicate lines in the sand and the coral-like structure could be on a dead planet with no life or liquid water, but it is so. The photo was taken by the Mars rover Curiosity, which has been traveling on Mars since August 6, 2012. The wavy lines are caused by Martian winds. However, the coral-like object is demonstrably not a living being, nor is it a fossilization of a plant. With this object, it acts just like the 2 rock spheres concretions, as concretion mineralogists designate special forms of the crystal formation of rock of different kind. Concretions can be spherical, bulbous, tubular, or even rose-shaped. The coral is a very rare example of a flower-shaped concretion. This find is very special because similar shapes have not been discovered on Mars before. This shape is finally not just an optical illusion, but truly a rare object that can provide cosmogeologists with important clues about mineral processes on Mars. It seems that many strange rock shapes have been discovered on Mars, but most of them were optical illusions. The Martian face, pyramid peaks, the Martian frog, and many other formations turned out to be pareidolia after a closer look. Researchers use this term when the human brain thinks it recognizes clues to familiar things like faces, plants, or buildings and rocks, or other inanimate structures. Curiosity and its successor rover, Perseverance, were specially equipped with sophisticated camera systems that allow panoramic views of rocks and should prevent optical illusions caused by pareidolia in the future. 2. Mars Light. This picture could have been taken somewhere on the prairies of the Wild West, where a lone rider spots the familiar light of home in the distance and looks forward to going home. But this picture was also taken on Mars. When NASA's Curiosity rover radioed this image to Earth on April 3, 2014, scientists were amazed. A single light source of this size should not actually exist on Mars. The location from which the light emanated was quickly checked. After all, it could not be ruled out that the reflection was caused by minerals or even a crashed Mars probe. When all natural and known sources could be ruled out as the origin of the light, the researchers were left to guess. They settled on a rare and hitherto unknown phenomenon that was most likely caused by cosmic rays. 3. What's that glittering in the sand? This image didn't seem all that strange or exciting at first, until one of the scientists on Earth noticed a slight glint in the Martian sand. Thanks to high-resolution cameras, the glint was made visible at extreme magnification. The image caused great astonishment. No researcher had ever seen anything like it on Mars, and no one could explain what the glitter snippet was. The discovery kept researchers on tenterhooks for several days. In 2012, because Curiosity is equipped with long gripper arms, it was possible for NASA's rover to pick up the odd piece and hold it closer to the cameras. After long deliberations, scientists grudgingly concluded that this part was most likely plastic that Curiosity itself had lost. What made the researchers uneasy was the fact that pieces of Curiosity's hardware appeared to be coming loose. The part had plopped down just after the 61st day of Curiosity's mission. Today, the rover has been in service for 10 more years, and time showed that the snippet's loss could not have been a bad thing. Of course, people on Earth were also concerned about the rover's environmental footprint. The fact that our probes leave trash on the red planet is disliked by some scientists, even if the planet is not inhabited. 4. Gray rock. Curiosity and Perseverance are the first Mars rovers that can analyze rock samples. They use two methods to do this. They grab some rock, dust, or sand with their arms and hold it close to the camera so researchers on Earth can get a really close look. Geologists can usually tell very well what the sample is by its color, how it trickles, or even how it reflects light. For even more precise analyses, the rovers point a laser at the rock. The reflected light beam is then read by the chemistry and camera instrument on board the rovers. In 2012, Curiosity became the first rover ever to drill into the surface of Mars, and this grayish rock came to light. This was an exciting moment for researchers because rocks on Mars are normally always orange, beige, or reddish. On Mars, the colors come from oxidation processes of the iron contained in the rock. Scientists hope to use the gray coloration, mineralogy, and chemistry of the rock powder to gain insights into the geological history and composition of Mars. Geological data can be used to draw further conclusions about the planet's past. Evidence of once wet environments and major water deposits may even be found. The rusting process and the reddish colors already show that there must have been humidity on today's dust-dry surface not so long ago. 5. Mars Henge. In 2015, the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter photographed from space this stone formation on the surface of Mars. The stone circle is apparently elevated on a hill and has an amazing geometry. Again, all coincidence? Or could these stones have once been placed there by living creatures? The formation quickly got the name Mars Henge and caused speculations all over the world. Just 2 years later, Curiosity photographed this formation. The July 2017 image shows a near-perfect circle and is quite different from the Mars craters that can be attributed to natural phenomena. Similar to Mars Henge, it also looks like these stone blocks were intentionally placed in this circular structure. Mars geologists actually suspect that the circle is just the tip of a much larger structure below. However, it will be at least a few decades before humans or robots will be able to conduct large-scale investigations or even excavations on Mars. All in all, the researchers think that this is also pareidolia. We want to see in the randomly arranged stones something made by living beings, because our brains are programmed that way, and the ideas of living beings on Mars are firmly anchored in our minds. The belief that Mars was a populated neighboring planet emerged as early as the late Middle Ages. When the Italian astronomer Cassini discovered the Martian gullies, he assumed that these were river courses. Color changes on the Martian surface looked from a distance like our seasons on Earth. The idea of the Martian was taken up several times in science fiction novels toward the end of the 19th century. On July 15, 1965, the first probe reached Mars. Mariner 4 delivered images that no one had expected. Instead of oceans, rivers, lakes, or even settlements, Mars provided impressions of a rather barren surface with craters, deserts, and some mountains. But there was no trace of life. In the coming decades, the image of a dust-dry and dead Mars became increasingly clear. People on Earth and scientists didn't quite know whether to be disappointed or reassured. A neighboring planet with a warlike population, much like the Martians were often portrayed in movies and books, would certainly have caused us more headaches than a completely inanimate world. Researchers have long since given up the search for existing life on Mars. Now it's really just a matter of finding out if life once existed on Mars. Computer simulations showed that Mars very likely had an atmosphere until a few million years ago. Life-friendly conditions could have prevailed under this atmosphere. It cannot be completely ruled out that life existed several million years ago, which then disappeared due to environmental catastrophes or the loss of the atmosphere. We too are in the process of destroying our atmosphere, and scientists are looking with horror at Mars. Could Earth look like this in a few thousand or million years? And would our buildings, monuments, or landscapes then also be hidden under a thick layer of rock and dust? These are precisely the questions that researchers would like to answer. For this reason, around 6 international probes and rovers are currently positioned on and around Mars. In addition to NASA's rovers and probes, more and more space novices are sending explorers to Mars. In 2021, China's first Mars rover, Zhurong, landed on the Red Planet. Zhurong moved faster than any other rover and is said to have even found evidence of former water deposits along its 2-kilometer route. China is currently withholding its findings, however. Last year, rumors surfaced that the rover, which was powered by solar sails, was no longer operational. The Chinese side did not comment further on the claims. India has also come close to the Red Planet with the Mars Orbiter mission, and even some super-rich sheiks from the United Arab Emirates are said to have Mars projects in the pipeline. So we can be curious which new surprising, bizarre, exciting, or just unique pictures will reach us soon from Mars. Together with the Mars rover Perseverance, a small, almost inconspicuous test object landed on Mars on February 18th, 2021. Actually, the mini helicopter named Ingenuity was only supposed to make a few test flights, but these small tests unintentionally turned into one of the greatest successes of Mars exploration. Ingenuity not only revolutionized the exploration of Mars, but also took the exploration of other planets in the solar system to a whole new level. Ingenuity and Perseverance. The Mars rover Perseverance was launched with the clear mission goal of finding traces of water on Mars. The aim is not only to detect currently existing water deposits. Perseverance is meant also to investigate traces of rock formations that indicate former watercourses or water deposits, such as lakes, springs, or oceans. According to the latest findings, there must once have been large quantities of water on Mars. These may have retreated underground after the evaporation of the Martian atmosphere and other dramatic upheavals. In addition to searching for water, the rover will collect rocks and send samples back to Earth for the first time in a unique retrieval mission. But that is still a long way off. The follow-up mission, which will bring the rock back to Earth, will start in 4 years at the earliest. Ingenuity has traveled to Mars in the belly of Perseverance. The small helicopter, which looks a bit like a dragonfly, actually had only one goal. Researchers on Earth wanted to know if a man-made flying object could fly on Mars. This may sound a bit strange at first, but if you know that the aeronautical conditions on Mars are very different from those on Earth due to the thin atmosphere and less powerful gravity, you will understand that a terrestrial helicopter design is not necessarily suitable for Mars. A helicopter weighing several tons can only take to the skies on Earth if it overcomes certain physical factors or uses the prevailing forces for itself and its flight. The gravitational force of Mars is only about 38% of Earth's gravity, so a flying object should be able to take off much more easily than on Earth. At the same time, however, it's not at all easy to get a flying object aloft in the 330-foot thinner Martian atmosphere. Ingenuity weighs only about 5 pounds, and its rotor blades can rotate at 2,400 revolutions per second. This means that the Mars helicopter rotates 10 times faster than any terrestrial helicopter. Despite thorough preparations, practically no one on Earth knew at the start of the mission whether the helicopter would be able to fly at all. And then little Ingenuity not only surprised its designers, but also ushered in a new era of Mars exploration. Ingenuity's landing on Mars. On April 13th, 2021, Perseverance let Ingenuity, which by then had been folded up to miniature size, plop out of its belly. The helicopter then stood on its own 2 feet for the first time. It took a full 10 days for the technology to be fully deployed and adjusted, and for Ingenuity's batteries to be charged. On top of that, the Martian weather had to be perfect for the helicopter to take off for the first time. On April 19th, the time had come. Ingenuity's first flight was only about 10 feet high and lasted 30 seconds. But as short as the flight may have been, it was perfect, and it represented a historic moment. Never before had a human-built flying machine taken off on a planet other than Earth. This picture was taken by Ingenuity itself during its maiden flight. You can see the shadow under the helicopter. By the second day, the helicopter was flying farther, and Perseverance was filming the flights of its own little companion. In the following weeks, the helicopter set off again and again for small sightseeing flights in the Jezero crater, where it had been dropped off together with Perseverance. The crater could have once been an impact hole of an asteroid, which later filled with water. This was indicated by images taken by other Mars missions. Some rock traces could even be evidence of bacteria or worm-like microbes. Perseverance is to investigate exactly that in the coming years. The fact that it will be accompanied by Ingenuity was not planned at all. The helicopter mission was supposed to be completed after 30 days. No one expected the construction to be so durable. Even after the first successful flights, the helicopter's real value became apparent. With a much wider range than Perseverance, the helicopter was soon able to locate the best spots in the crater that Perseverance would have taken days or weeks to reach. Ingenuity found clues that pointed to an ancient water channel. If we didn't know better on Earth, we might even think these formations are the remains of an old road. Craters that might once have been filled with water are also very visible in Ingenuity's images. During its fifth flight in July 2021, Ingenuity discovered more evidence of rock formations that provide valuable information about Mars's past. Thanks to Ingenuity's flights, NASA researchers were soon able to survey a field in the crater as wide as they had ever dreamed. Then in the summer of 2021, major problems arose with a sensor and the helicopter's remote control. Pessimists saw the mission at an end, but Ingenuity lived up to its name. The small helicopter overcame all problems and took off again and again for flights that became longer and longer. Ingenuity's flight altitude is only 33 feet. Initially, the helicopter could only fly a few feet at a time, but at its record, Ingenuity eventually covered 2,200 feet in a few minutes. Perseverance moves very slowly at 0.07 miles per hour. To go 21 feet, the 2,260-pound exploration vehicle needs up to half an hour. The ground rover has little chance of covering further distances, but that's no problem for Ingenuity. Ingenuity has now become the permanent companion and co-explorer of the Mars rover, Perseverance. Thanks to this collaboration between a flying scout and a ground rover, Mars missions could be much more successful and easier in the future. Bird's-eye images will allow NASA scientists to be in two places on Mars at once. Helicopters could also easily be able to explore areas of Mars that are not accessible to rovers. Who knows? In the future, NASA may even be able to build combinations of helicopters and ultralight robots that can even take rock or material samples when loaded. This type of exploration is now under discussion for other planets, and especially for Saturn's moons Titan and Enceladus. Anniversary flight on April 19th, 2022. Nobody would have thought it at the beginning of the mission. On April 19th, 2022, the surprise success project Ingenuity took off on its anniversary flight. In the process, the helicopter once again delivered a shot that caused surprise on Earth. Unfortunately, this image does not show a crashed flying saucer or the dome of a Martian house. The debris in the photo was part of the heat shield Perseverance used to float toward the surface of Mars. What else did Ingenuity find? In April of this year, Ingenuity studied these tilted rock layers, whose appearance on the Martian surface is an absolute geological anomaly. Thanks to the aerial photography, researchers can compare the two inclined ridge lines in an optimal way. The findings could help to better understand the history of the formation and the past of the Jezero crater. Strange find from Perseverance. Perseverance and Ingenuity have now been on the surface of Mars for a year and a half. Of course, researchers on Earth always secretly hope for a groundbreaking or particularly exciting find. What if traces of a lost civilization or of larger creatures such as animals were to appear somewhere on the surface of Mars? NASA researchers in the Control Center are watching the images and data sent by Perseverance and Ingenuity almost around the clock. When this object appeared on our rover image, everyone held their breath. This strange structure stands out completely from all other appearances on the surface of Mars. It resembles a piece of rope, an old fishing line, or even a coral-like creature from the sea. Probably none of these objects could be found on the surface of Mars. But what was it then? Researchers on Earth finally agreed that the image most likely shows a piece of rope that came from the parachutes used to set Perseverance down. Time and again, images like these cause a sensation on Earth. In 2014, the Mars rover Curiosity was able to capture this image of an object that looked suspiciously like a bone, but speculations that there might be evidence of life on Mars after all were denied shortly after the image was released. It was only rock, responsible scientists said. Still, the majority of the terrestrial astronomers insists on the fact that there can be at the most traces of microbes or other small living beings on Mars. Nevertheless, model calculations exist saying that Mars was a water world with an atmosphere similar to ours many millions of years ago. If these theories are correct, there could have been vegetation and larger living beings on Mars. It's not to be excluded that the remains of these living beings are still buried several feet deep under the surface of Mars, completely analogous to the bones of the dinosaurs, extinct many millions of years ago. Perseverance and Ingenuity. What happens next? We can expect many surprising discoveries from Perseverance and Ingenuity in the coming months. This much is clear. The little helicopter is still flying. The helicopter completed its 34th flight on November 10th, 2022. How long Perseverance and Ingenuity will be on Mars together is currently an open question, since the helicopter has now already far exceeded all the requirements placed on it. The scientists are simply delighted with each additional successful flight. Perseverance's mission was scheduled for at least 1 Mars year. That corresponds to about 687 Earth days. This means that Perseverance has already completed more than half of its mission, but it's very likely that the rover will be in operation for much longer. Its predecessor, Curiosity, rolled over the Martian soil for more than 10 years. Regardless of how long the rover will be in operation, the greatest achievement of the exceptional project will be towards the end of the decade, when the Mars Sample Return mission is to bring the collected rock samples back to Earth. Whether Ingenuity will still be flying then is written in the stars. We bid you farewell for today with this selfie Perseverance snapped of itself and its little flying companion shortly after setting down in April 2021. As always, Mars is now considered the best explored planet in the solar system. No other celestial body has been visited by as many probes and robots as the Red Planet. Yet we still know so little about our planetary neighbor. The rovers Curiosity and Perseverance surprise us with new sightings almost every month, and slowly a picture is emerging that Mars will soon be ready for human settlement. Now, let's take a look together at why living conditions on Mars are getting better and what the latest discoveries are that are driving settlement plans. Sit back and be amazed by the most incredible finds NASA has made on Mars. Biological molecules on Mars. In 2022, NASA announced a sensational find. The Perseverance rover found evidence of organic molecules very close to ancient water sources. It was not the first time a rover had discovered an organic-looking substance on the Red Planet, yet this discovery was different. Evidence of biological life in a place where liquid water almost certainly once flowed is a sensation. Even for astrobiologists who have studied Mars for decades, the find was a shock. With its instruments, the Mars rover has the ability to identify organic and chemical substances in rock samples. Scanning the molecules clearly revealed hydrogen atoms with carbon atoms. Carbon is an essential building block for life and could indicate biological activity. Evidence for the presence of sulfates substantiates this suspicion. as sulfates are another clue to life forms. So, are these the first images of the very first extraterrestrial life forms ever sighted? It's very likely, and if the suspicion is confirmed, this discovery will go down in human history. However, some researchers also urge caution. The molecules in the crater could also have been formed by non-organic processes. Scientists will only be able to answer this question with certainty when rock samples are brought back to Earth, and that is precisely what will happen in just a few years. The return mission will begin in 2026 with the Mars Sample Return Mission. Perseverance found the traces of molecules in Jezero Crater, where the rover has been searching for traces of water and life since 2021. The crater probably formed about 3.5 billion years ago. Later, it may have been a crater lake, and sediments of sand, dirt, and salts have accumulated over time. Perseverance's find is believed to be the largest amount of organic molecules recovered on Mars to date. On Earth, molecular compounds like these often occur in fossil sedimentary rocks. Exactly what this means is not yet certain. Are they the first traces of simple organic life? Or are these molecules all we will ever find about life on Mars? It is one of the great mysteries of space exploration whether Mars was inhabited, and if so, to what extent? What is certain is that it once occupied an atmosphere and plenty of flowing water. But that period was millions of years ago, and it's almost impossible today to predict with certainty whether that epoch produced higher life or even plants. If researchers find microorganisms still alive in the subglacial lakes on Mars, or if these microorganisms can be reconstructed based on their legacies, it would be a step forward towards colonizing the planet. Local microorganisms are perfectly adapted to the harsh conditions on Mars, and by studying these microorganisms, we humans can learn how to protect ourselves against the various climatic hazards of the red planet. Moxie provides oxygen for settlers. Plans to colonize Mars have made yet another crucial advance. It sounds almost unbelievable, but a device could turn Martian air into oxygen. This would allow the settlers and scientists who will be the first to live on Mars to obtain their breathing air directly from the environment. The device that performs this miracle is called Moxie, and it works by separating oxygen atoms from CO2 molecules. The byproduct is carbon monoxide, which is likely to be easily released into the atmosphere permanently on Mars. Currently, the device is capable of producing up to 10 grams of oxygen per hour. In initial tests, the yield was about 5.4 grams of oxygen per hour. That would be enough to allow an astronaut to breathe for about 10 minutes. It's clear that this technology needs to be improved a long way, but it's only a matter of time. Moxie is a start and is already of great value now because it can extract virtually unlimited amounts of oxygen from the raw materials in the Martian atmosphere. In addition to carbon dioxide, which makes up about 96% of the Martian atmosphere, Moxie uses the Martian rock, regolith. A special process is used to extract oxygen from this mineral as well, and in combination with hydrogen, the device can even produce hydrogen fuel from regolith. This, in turn, is intended to serve as a fuel or heating agent on Mars. Elon Musk follows developments. Currently, NASA and SpaceX CEO Elon Musk are eagerly following the scientists' discoveries. Elon Musk wants to send the first humans to Mars as early as 2029, and any progress in basic supplies and security for humans means that this time frame will be met. The Starship spacecraft is currently undergoing intensive testing. It's not yet clear whether Elon Musk's spacecraft will be able to transport sufficient supplies of materials and eventually humans to Mars. The first test flights took place near Earth. Soon the Starship will fly humans to the Moon, and the next step will be material deliveries en route to Mars as part of an unmanned flight. Elon Musk's entrepreneurial spirit and desire to colonize space has left its mark. NASA, under President Barack Obama, resumed an old program to colonize the Moon. The Artemis project was promised funds from the Senate, and the first unmanned flights to the Moon have already taken place. Artemis is intended to be the launch run for humanity's move into space. The manned lunar station serves as a near-Earth test of how long humans can stay on an extraterrestrial celestial body without suffering long-term damage. The moon is already considered to be largely safe because modern spacecraft can be on site in as little as 3 days and evacuate people in an emergency. In addition to a lunar station on the surface, Artemis will consist of a space station in orbit around the moon. Both stations are to be permanently manned by humans. If Mars colonization can get underway, the Artemis stations on the moon will serve as intermediate landing sites or refueling stations. If everything goes according to plan, astronauts will land on the lunar surface as part of the Artemis 3 mission in 2025 or 2027. NASA also plans to send a manned space mission to Mars by 2040. Whether NASA and SpaceX will join forces here is currently unclear. What is in store for humans? Neither SpaceX nor NASA will have any problems finding people who want to be settlers in space. In addition to professional astronauts, scientists, doctors, and ordinary people will gradually move into space. Preparations are in full swing. NASA is already training the first astronauts and looking for medical professionals who want to be the first humans to live on the moon. Technical facilities and greenhouses are being tested in Antarctica and other extreme areas. So far, the results are good. Nevertheless, by no means all obstacles have been cleared out of the way. On the moon, the settlers can be supplied very well from the Earth, but the first humans on Mars will be largely on their own. After the flight, the settlers will have to settle on Mars under extremely difficult conditions. No one yet knows how the nervous system and organism of humans will react to the conditions on Mars. According to experts, the first crew will probably land near the Martian equator. The canyons of frozen water in the Valles Marineris would be the perfect landing site. The ice only needs to be melted and water is available for drinking, growing crops, and meeting household needs in almost unlimited quantities. The settlers must permanently wear spacesuits and be supplied with oxygen. Martian air consists of a toxic mixture of carbon dioxide, nitrogen, and argon. There remains the question of the return of the settlers from Mars. If humans can only endure the conditions for a few months or years, crews will have to be replaced regularly. Humans should also be able to leave Mars quickly in an emergency. Elon Musk is planning a complete factory for this, producing rockets as well as the fuel needed for them directly on Mars. This all sounds fantastic and a bit like science fiction, but in just a few years, this could be a reality. Dangers for humans. Of course, with all of this excitement, we also have to ask ourselves how far Mars actually is. Volcanic eruptions on Mars stopped a long time ago. The interior of the planet cooled and solidified, weakening the magnetic field. Solar winds blew away the atmosphere, and the remaining water froze. Geological activity has been lower on Mars since then, yet the planet is not dead. Recently, Mars has become more active, and let's put it this way, researchers may have noticed more of Mars's activity than was the case before. Everything changed when astronomers examined thousands of images of the equatorial region of Mars. These images were taken between 2006 and 2020 by NASA's Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter. The high-rise camera took the images at an altitude of 300 kilometers above the Martian surface. The magnifications allow researchers to distinguish and study individual objects as small as 1 meter. The study revealed a large number of landslides and debris avalanches on the slopes of Martian volcanoes. Scientists discovered more than 4,500 traces of boulders showing signs of a strong earthquake. About 1/3 of the traces were not present in images taken before 2006, suggesting that they were formed later. It's obvious that only very strong subsurface shaking could move these huge boulders. Although there have been signs of mild Martian earthquakes, evidence of shaking of this magnitude has not yet been found on Mars. Mars storms are a known problem. Seasonally, extreme storms rage and stir up the sand and dust on the Martian surface. Currently, researchers are already searching for the landing and settlement sites that offer humans the most safety. As the storms rage across Mars, no place is 100% safe. Presumably, Martian homes that are halfway under the ground and securely anchored to the soil will offer the best conditions in craters, or wind-sheltered valleys. Currently, astronomical headlines are dominated by one topic: the acclaimed deployment of the James Webb Space Telescope. In light of this, however, we should not forget that many other technical devices are currently performing their galactic service, such as the Mars rover Perseverance. At this very moment, while you are watching our video, the land vehicle is searching for traces on the reddish shimmering surface of the celestial body that should help us understand our planetary neighbor better than ever. Which tasks Perseverance will dedicate itself to in the coming years, and which unexpected Mars discoveries have already been recorded, we'll show you in today's video. Mars 2020. On February 18th, 2021, the time had come. NASA's lander successfully touched down on the surface of the red planet, covered in iron oxide dust. In addition to the Mars rover Perseverance mentioned at the beginning, however, this also applied to its technical colleague, Ingenuity, the first helicopter drone in history to be deployed on a celestial body other than Earth. At the heart of the Mars 2020 mission is a central question: can traces indicating the existence of life be found on our neighboring planet, in view of the arid desert world that the celestial body embodies today? The answer to this question seems clear at first. However, the matter is somewhat different if we turn back the wheel of time by a few billion years. At that time, Mars not only had a much denser atmosphere, but also rich water resources. The fact that the planet accommodates higher or even intelligent life forms is categorically excluded in the ranks of the experts, however. Primitive micro-life forms, or in other words, microbes, that live in the radiation-protected depths of the soil, on the other hand, are conceivable. Which brings us back to the use of Perseverance. To gain information about possible life on the red planet, the $2.5 billion instrument will analyze rock samples for biosignatures, study geological processes, and collect data on the general geological evolution of Mars. It will also study the celestial body's climate and pave the way for the age of manned Mars missions. For example, the rover will convert carbon dioxide into oxygen and evaluate the corresponding results. On April 20th, 2021, this endeavor was put into practice on an alien planet for the first time in the history of space travel. Within 1 hour, 5.4 grams of oxygen were produced from carbon dioxide, enough breathing air for 10 minutes. A dried-up river delta in the Jezero crater was chosen as the landing site. Until about 3.5 billion years ago, there was an extensive Martian lake here, which reached a depth of 820 feet. But why did the experts actually decide to bring a small helicopter to Mars with Ingenuity? In view of the fact that the merely 4-pound device carries no instruments other than cameras, it's clear that Ingenuity serves primarily as a test model for upcoming flying objects on the red planet. So far, the drone has met this pioneering requirement brilliantly. On April 19th, 2021, the helicopter rose 10 feet above the surface of Mars and maintained the scheduled flight altitude for just under 40 seconds. While we are already eagerly awaiting the insights that Perseverance will provide us with in the foreseeable future, we take this opportunity to take a look at a literally shattering observation made by NASA's InSight spacecraft. Strongest Mars quake ever. While Perseverance mission is just getting off the ground, InSight is also coming to an end. Landed on Mars on November 26, 2018, the secondary mission is already scheduled to end this year. In the run-up to the project, the probe, which weighs just under 1,545 pounds, was given a number of basic objectives. In summary, the lander, equipped with a heat flow probe and a seismometer, was to analyze the early geological development of the celestial body. With the help of the knowledge gained, the understanding of the formation of Earth-like celestial bodies should be significantly deepened. From the data collected, the scientists concluded that Mars and our terrestrial home are quite similar in terms of structure. However, the red planet has a larger liquid core as well as a thinner crust than experts had predicted in advance. And the recently recorded observation, which hit the headlines a few months ago, is also expected to help further understand the inner workings of Mars. Specifically, InSight recorded a tremor with a magnitude of 5. making the event the strongest quake yet recorded on an alien planet. Unlike the other representatives of our planetary system, Earth is the only one that still has active plate tectonics. The tremors, which take place on the remaining celestial bodies, must therefore have other causes. Of the more than 1,300 Mars quakes that InSight has recorded so far, the one just mentioned stands out in particular. It would also have been clearly noticeable on Earth. In fact, experts are still arguing about the origin of the quakes on Mars. Up to now, researchers have only partially deciphered how the formation of the Martian mantle occurs in detail and to what extent magma currents or even a mantle convection exist there. If scientists succeed in unraveling this fundamental mystery, they will also come closer to answering another, no less exciting question. What caused the red planet to lose its global magnetic field in the past? Impossible material. In 2016, there was much excitement among experts. NASA's Curiosity rover recorded a proverbial impossible find on the red planet. In a rock sample from the Gale crater, the device came across residues of the mineral tridymite. In detail, this was a certain quartz form, which is usually connected with silicic acid-rich volcanism. Thus, the mineral is formed when silicates are first strongly heated and then rapidly cooled. That this form of volcanism, which is accompanied by a high concentration of silicic acid, occurs in some places on Earth is well known, but that it could also exist on our neighboring planet, nobody suspected until this discovery. At first, the scientists tried to find indications that tridymite can also be formed at lower temperatures. However, since this search for clues came to nothing, the assumption arose that Mars once became the scene of much more violent volcanic activity than previously assumed. However, a team of researchers from Rice University in Houston has now succeeded in providing a plausible explanation for the seemingly impossible. The magma in question must have remained in the underground chamber longer than usual, where it cooled somewhat over time. In the course of this, the silicate-rich portions of the red-hot mixture rose to the top. In the course of a violent eruption, mainly the silicate-rich material was ejected, which contained the later discovered tridymite. With the help of the wind, it was finally carried to the Gale crater, which must have still contained water at that time. The characteristic weathering traces leave no doubt about that. Traces of life? One thing is certain, if life existed or even still exists on Mars, it must have left its traces there. After Curiosity encountered organic molecules on the red planet in the summer of 2018, the expert world was beside itself. Subsequent investigations showed that the methane concentration is also subject to regular fluctuations and is not evenly distributed, but is present in patterns of elevated concentrations. However, we still cannot say with absolute certainty where the methane in the Martian atmosphere really comes from. The relevant theories range from comet impacts to active volcanism to methane-producing microorganisms. However, these microorganisms would have to be at home at great depths, namely in those subterranean regions where the temperatures allow the presence of permanently liquid water. Although methane can also be formed abiotically, up to 95% of all methane on Earth is produced biologically. While the international space agencies drop more and more complex equipment on the red planet, some clues to the existence of Martian life also come directly to our Earth. Foremost among these would be the Nakhla meteorite, which struck near an Egyptian village in the early 20th century. In the context of an investigation, which was accomplished in the year 1999, the researchers discovered different amino acid and possible biomorph traces. Then, 7 years later, a portion of the galactic rock was broken up to allow analysis of a contamination-free sample. In the process, the experts encountered many complex, carbonaceous materials that contained pores and channels in the rock, much like we know from terrestrial bacteria. However, this does not mean that the Martian meteorite provides incontrovertible proof of the existence of microorganisms on Mars. In fact, the majority of experts believe that the mere presence of these conspicuous forms is not enough to confirm Martian bacteria.
The red planet has always fascinated people. In the course of the exploration of space, the first Mars missions began in 1960. These first missions were space probes that were to fly past Mars and record data. NASA, the space agency of the USA, had its first success on November 28, 1964, with Mariner 4. Since then, many more space probes have been sent to Mars. Even the landing of various Mars rovers such as Spirit, Opportunity, Phoenix, and Curiosity has been successful since then. Finally, on November 5, 2013, the first Indian mission to Mars took off, breaking several records in the process. India's Mars Orbiter Mission. The Mars Orbiter Mission, also known as the Mangalyaan of the Indian Space Research Organization, ISRO, was not only the first Asian mission to Mars, but also the first mission to succeed on the first attempt. After all, there is a distance of 56 to 401 million kilometers between Mars and Earth, depending on the position of the planets in their orbit. The first aspect considers the scientific knowledge gained by exploring the surface of Mars. For this purpose, the space probe has 5 scientific instruments for the acquisition of various measured values. One of them is the Mars Color Camera, MCC, which provides images and information about the surface and composition of Mars. The MCC took its first image of the Martian surface on September 25, 2014, at a distance of 7,300 kilometers. Since then, numerous images have been taken, providing scientists with information about the universe and the development of Mars. Dust storms on Mars. On September 28, 2014, a dust storm was successfully recorded on Mars. Although dust storms on Mars with speeds of 100 kilometers per hour are comparatively less powerful than on Earth, they can assume enormous proportions. In intervals of 5.5 Earth years, there are even global storms which cover the entire planet. These storms have already caused problems with Mars rovers in the past. The dust storms block the sunlight so that the rovers have no energy to recharge. The Mars moon Phobos. Although the moon Phobos was already discovered by Asaph Hall on August 17, 1877, it was also possible to photograph it as a silhouette in the foreground of the Mars surface during the mission. Phobos is one of the 2 moons of Mars, along with Deimos. Its name comes from the Greek and means fear. Its orbit is less than 6,000 kilometers away from Mars, so Phobos needs only 7 hours, 39 minutes, and 12 seconds to orbit the planet. Just like the Earth's moon, the Mars moon always turns the same side towards its central body. This is called bound rotation. Global images of Mars. Unlike other space probes, the orbit of the Indian spacecraft is strongly elliptical. Therefore, the space probe is simultaneously very close and very far away from Mars. This offers a decisive advantage, because in this way, global complete images of Mars are possible. This makes it easier to understand Mars, since the positions of prominent phenomena in relation to each other can be better understood. Previously, the sections of different images had to be painstakingly combined. Valles Marineris. The Valles Marineris represents a particularly striking appearance of the surface of Mars. These rocky gorges, which extend like a large dark scar over the eastern part of Mars, are one of the largest rift valley systems in the solar system, with a width and depth of 700 kilometers and a length of 4,000 kilometers. The largest rift system is also located on Earth in Africa. Valles Marineris is located in the Tharsis region, a 4 million kilometer squared area of Mars, and was first recorded by the space probe Mariner 9. There are many different theories about the origin of Valles Marineris. The most widespread theory is based on cracks in the crust of the Martian surface. According to this theory, these cracks were formed by erosion, otherwise known as destruction by water, and by collapsing rock structures. Noctis Labyrinthus. The name Noctis Labyrinthus comes from Latin, labyrinth of the night, and describes a trench net on the Valles Marineris. The name is derived from the labyrinthian arrangement of the trench structures. Research into the composition of the rock structure have revealed various minerals in the layers, which are usually found in connection with water or are associated with water. This leads to the conclusion that there were larger water deposits on Mars in the past. Today, water on Mars only occurs in the atmosphere in the form of ice or as steam. Additionally, cloud structures consisting of water and ice are visible on many images. Olympus Mons. Like Valles Marineris, Olympus Mons is located in the Tharsis region of Mars. It's a volcano, which is recognizable even from far away due to its enormous size. With a height of almost 22 kilometers and a diameter of 600 kilometers, it is the largest known volcano and mountain in our solar system. For comparison, Mount Everest in the Himalayas is only slightly less than 9 kilometers high. One of the reasons why volcanoes on Mars can reach such a size is that there is less attraction on Mars. On Earth, on the other hand, mountains cannot exceed a height of 9 to 10 kilometers because the pressure exerted by the mass is too high. Various photographs from the MCC show the Olympus Mons in detail. Tyrrhenus Mons and Hadriacus Mons. Another volcano on Mars that was recorded during the Mars Orbiter mission is the Tyrrhenus Mons. It has an estimated diameter of 300 kilometers and is one of the oldest volcanoes on Mars. Nevertheless, it's younger than Hadriacus Mons, a neighboring volcano. Hadriacus Mons is 1.1 kilometer high and has a diameter of 450 kilometers. Both volcanoes show channels formed by lava flows, which run radially on the slope. Also, Elysium Mons. Elysium Mons is also a large volcano found on Mars. It was discovered in 1972 by the space probe Mariner 9 and was again recorded during the Mars Orbiter mission. However, the volcano, which has a height of 12.6 kilometers, is different from the volcanoes of the Tharsis region mentioned above. In contrast to these volcanoes, Elysium Mons does not have any grooves or furrows caused by lava flows. Kasei Valles. Kasei Valles refers to a valley on Mars, which was formed about 1.5 to 3.5 billion years ago. At that time, water volumes of up to 1 billion cubic meters per second flowed over its length of 2,500 kilometers, so that today's valley was formed by the erosion of water. In addition, the Worcester impact crater can be seen in the middle of the valley on the photographs of the Mars Orbiter mission. This crater with a diameter of 25 kilometers was not washed away by the erosive force of the water masses and therefore still exists today. Martian crater. When looking at the images of Mars, it quickly becomes apparent that it is littered with many craters. However, contrary to earlier assumptions, not all regions of Mars are equally covered by craters. Such craters are formed when asteroids or meteoroids collide with Mars, and their impact knocks large amounts of rock out of the surface, creating the typical round impact craters. The size and depth of the craters depend on the speed and mass of the impacting object. The IAU, International Astronomical Union, and the USGS, US Geological Survey, assign and manage the names of the impact craters, although not all of them have their own names. The names are chosen after famous scientists, science fiction authors, or cities with less than 100,000 inhabitants. Orcus Patera. Orcus Patera is the name of an unusual structure on Mars. It's an elliptical, elongated lowland plain whose edge is surrounded by a sort of mountain wall. Orcus Patera is 140 kilometers wide, 380 kilometers long, and 400 to 600 meters deep. There are many different theories about the formation of this structure, but they cannot be clearly and conclusively clarified with the current state of knowledge. For example, Orcus Patera could have been caused by an impacting celestial body. However, since impact craters are round and not elliptical, this could have been deformed by movements of the Martian crust. Another possibility would be an extremely flat impact angle of less than 5 degrees. In this case, the celestial body would have rather scratched the surface of Mars. Services of the Mars Orbiter mission. Given that the primary aspect of this mission was the technical development of the spacecraft, scientific aspects were only secondary. Nevertheless, the mission also produced achievements in the scientific field. Even though the Mars Orbiter mission itself did not make any new discoveries, the numerous images taken by the Mars Color Camera confirmed and deepened existing discoveries and theories and stimulated new discussions. Ultimately, behind all these efforts are the questions about the origin of the universe and life on Earth, as well as the exploration of possible life on Mars. With a look far into the future, Mars could even be colonized. Although such a thing is still science fiction today, it is quite possible in the future. What do you think about this? Is the exploration of foreign planets important, or just a waste of money? If it were possible, would you yourself want to live in a base on Mars? And how realistic do you think the colonization of Mars in general would be? After all, even many unmanned missions fail nowadays. Since NASA's Mariner 4 spacecraft passed Mars in July 1965 and transmitted the first close-up images of our red neighbor planet to Earth, a lot has happened. Over the decades that followed, dozens of other complex instruments were sent to the Martian terrain and surface, where they collected important data, produced detailed images, and put ambitious research projects into action. However, the numerous Mars missions that have been completed in the meantime by no means mean that we have already unlocked all the secrets of our cosmic neighbor. Surprising discoveries are still regularly made on the legendary celestial body, which cannot always be immediately placed in a plausible context. In today's video, we show you which bizarre structure NASA's Curiosity rover recently discovered on the dust-covered surface of the planet, and what other recent Martian discoveries are keeping scientists spellbound. Enigmatic structure. If we were to take a cursory glance at the images taken by Curiosity without knowing their backgrounds, we might quickly get the idea that they depicted fossilized coral. In truth, however, the fascinating images were not taken at the bottom of a terrestrial sea, but in the middle of the massive Gale crater. The imposing impact site, which was formed an estimated 3.5 billion years ago and has a diameter of almost 93 miles, has been under close scrutiny by Curiosity since 2012. Given the amazing shape of the flower-like object captured on image, a key question arises. What is it in detail? You could say such structures embody ancient relics of Mars's past, which significantly help researchers trace the evolution of the celestial body on the first hand. Accordingly, the object was formed at a time when the now dust-dry surface of Mars was still graced by accumulations of water and flowing streams. Thus, the exciting structure represents the result of rivers that once meandered across Mars, deforming and solidifying the rock by carrying minerals with them. Thundering masses of water. The extent to which water masses from the past helped shape the face of Mars also becomes clear to us when we take a look at the exciting research investigation whose results were published a few months ago. The fact that Mars once had liquid water is now considered certain by experts. Accordingly, the countless dried-up river channels and canyons testify to the fact that the red planet was not always as dry as dust as it appears today. However, the question of how much liquid water actually once existed on our neighboring planet is still the subject of heated debate. Some researchers assume that it was nothing more than temporary rainfall that created temporary streams on the surface. On the other hand, there is the assumption that Mars once could have had steady rivers, lakes, and even full-scale seas. An alternative approach is based on the assumption that it was the meltwater of large glaciers that formed the rivers and bodies of water on Mars. The realizations, which were attained by the expert team around Timothy Gouge of the University of Texas in the context of their investigation, suggest, however, a completely different assumption. These scientists identified some references which point to the fact that it was in truth mainly roaring torrents that sculpted the landscape picture of the red planet. These acted through water accumulations in craters. The water had accumulated first in the impact site, whereby over the course of time, an immensely large pressure developed, which brought the edges of the crater to burst. The result of these processes were consequently gigantic water masses, which spilled over the surrounding areas like flash floods. Since enormous amounts of stored energy were released during such processes, the erupting floods could have left deep trenches and canyons on the surface within a very short time. In order to understand how often such crater flash floods occurred on Mars and what role they really played in the formation of the river valleys, that are still visible today, the experts focused on those dried-up river channels that apparently have their origins at the edge of a crater and also show no connection to other former river networks. The researchers succeeded in identifying a total of 262 such structures. The exact analysis of the landscape formations, however, drew a truly surprising picture. The force of the released water accumulations could have been sufficient to have eroded 14 trillion cubic meters of sediment. For classification, this corresponds to nearly 25% of the entire material eroded in Mars River valleys. The enormous Mars Valley, carrying the name Ma'adim Vallis, also shows the enormous forces acting at that time. Accordingly, this mile-deep and 500-mile-long cleft was also formed by such a crater flash flood. An indication for life? As is well known, the question of the exact history of the former Martian waters is just one of the most central aspects of planetary explanation. There is also another, no less exciting topic. Was it possible that living beings once existed on our red neighboring planet? As we all know, researchers have not yet been able to provide a clear answer to this highly exciting research question. This makes the unusual Martian sediment samples that Curiosity recovered some time ago all the more fascinating. What puzzled researchers about the discovery in question was the fact that the samples had strikingly low levels of the carbon isotope C13. As a general rule, where living organisms cannot be detected directly, other traces must be tracked down that testify to their former existence. Organic compounds, such as dimethyl sulfate, chloromethane, or thiophene, serve as possible evidence that a celestial body once harbored extraterrestrial life. Typically, such molecular compounds are produced by microorganisms on our blue home planet. However, they can also be based on geochemical processes. The situation is quite similar in the case of the recorded Mars methane, the background of which has not yet been revealed. In order to find out whether the corresponding carbon compounds on the red planet have a geological or an organic background, an analysis of the isotope content proves to be particularly promising. We know from our terrestrial organisms that they prefer to incorporate the light carbon isotope C12 into their tissue. Thus, material that has low levels of the carbon isotope C13 compared to the rock and atmosphere is considered potentially organic. To see how the characteristic distribution presents itself on Mars, Curiosity took more than 30 drill samples in the Gale crater. In order to obtain as comprehensive and broad an image as possible during the exploration, the samples were again taken from different locations and rocks. Subsequently, numerous drill samples were examined in detail and also examined by the rover's laser spectrometer with regard to their isotope contents. The unexpected finding? 10 of the samples examined contained surprisingly little C13 carbon, while the corresponding values in the atmosphere of the celestial body still amount to plus 46 per mil. They were quantified to minus 70 per mil in the analyzed soil samples. If such a result would be recorded on Earth, the researchers would not hesitate to assign an organic background to the recorded values. In the case of Mars, however, the experts are much more cautious, because these explanations, which are valid on our terrestrial homeland, might not be transferred seamlessly to the processes of Mars. In order to understand the true background of the conspicuous samples, it must first be clarified whether there could be other natural processes on the red planet that could explain the carbon isotope values. In this connection, 3 different theses exist in the rows of experts, which are considered at present equally. Possible explanations. By far the most exciting explanation is based on the fact that the recorded values were actually created by Martian microorganisms. Theoretically, it would be conceivable that the microbes were feeding methane into their cells. The biogenic organic compounds that were created in the course of this process consequently remained in the Martian sediment in the form of residues. Such a scenario could also explain why the soil samples with extremely negative C13 values also contain reduced sulfur. Thus, we know from some terrestrial bacteria that the anaerobic oxidation of methane is often accompanied by the reduction of sulfate. However, non-organic backgrounds are also conceivable. About every 100 million years, our solar system is immersed in a molecular dust cloud. As a result of these cosmic dust showers, an increasing number of particles with an extremely low C13 content flow into the Earth. So, in theory, it would be possible that Mars also came into contact with these interstellar dust particles. The low C13 particles could have then accumulated in the ice of the red planet. This would be consistent with the fact that the surprising isotope values come mainly from samples that once graced the surface of the celestial body. Last but not least, there remains the scenario of photochemical reaction of methane and carbon dioxide in the atmosphere of the red planet. As a result of the influence of sunlight, the corresponding processes could have initiated an abiotic formation and deposition of organic molecules. In order to reveal the true background of the recorded values, the researchers now need one thing above all: even more meaningful data. This is the only way experts might one day be able to refute or confirm the explanations presented. Now it's your turn. What do you think about the exciting discoveries and research projects on Mars? Write us your thoughts, your suggestions, and your feedback to today's contribution below in the comments. Would you like to see more interesting articles on the topic of outer space? Then take a look at the other videos on our channel, which we have linked for you in the credits. Thanks a lot for watching, take care, and we'll see you next time.